Can a single free training change the fate of a whole season in Formula One? What happened to Lewis Hamilton in Baku so that, after a disastrous start, he ended up leading a free practice as if nothing had happened? Stay, because what happened in Azerbaijan can be the first chapter of one of the greatest resurrections of modern F1. What happened in Baku with Lewis Hamilton was not just an improvement. It was a reconstruction, a rebirth. And as everything resurfaces, it started from the lowest. The first free training session was an absolute disaster. Literally. Hamilton ended outside the top 10 in position 13, but the number did not tell the full story. Telemetry revealed a pilot disconnected from his car, doubting each curve, braking earlier than usual and without any traction at the exit of the turns. But what worried the most was not the rhythm itself but the cause behind, the brake system. In Baku, brakes are not one more detail. They are the heart of performance. Braking more than 320 kilometers per hour that must be executed with surgical precision, in narrow areas and with zero margin of error. And the SF-25 in the hands of Hamilton did not offer any of that. The statements after that session were hard. Lewis, nothing was kept. A disaster. I have no confidence. Without confidence in the brakes you can't attack this track. And he was right. The urban layout of Azerbaijan does not forgive doubts. It is a track that rewards courage, but only if it is backed by a predictable car. At that time, Ferrari was not doing it. But this is where everything changed. What happened in the next 3 hours between FP1 and FP2 was a surgical operation of technical precision by Ferrari, and also a testimony of maturity and humility by Hamilton, who agreed to change his approach, listened to engineers and allowed a radical intervention in the car. The technical team led by Loic Serra had prepared a series of modifications for Baku, but were planned to be used progressively. The chaos of the FP1 accelerated everything. They decided to immediately apply the new configurations of the front brake ducts, which until that time had not been tested under real conditions. These pieces were not a simple aerodynamic improvement. They were specifically designed for a circuit like Baku, long, straight, violent braking and 90-degree curves that require maximum refrigeration to maintain system efficiency. But it was not only tried to change hardware. It was a complete reconfiguration of the braking balance, differential mapping, rear brake pressure and car retention behavior when released the accelerator. The priority was to return confidence to Hamilton by attacking each braking area. And it worked. In the FP2 what we saw was another person, another pilot, another car. Hamilton went on track and from the first round it was clear that he had taken a leap. I no longer hesitated at the curve entrance. The car did not move erratically when the brake released. The times began to fall around after. And when he finally crossed the line with a 1:41.293, he was established. Ferrari led the table. And not only with Hamilton. Leclerc was second, but only 74 thousandths. A 1-2 in practices that had not been seen for a long time in real conditions of pure rhythm. The most impressive thing was that Hamilton did it calmly, without going to the absolute limit. What transmitted in chamber was a security that had been absent since his arrival in Maranello. And that, for someone like him, changes everything. After getting out of the car, his words made it clear. We made deep changes and the brakes worked perfect. I could tighten. I could attack. I feel comfortable. But beyond what he said, what he transmitted was something else. Hamilton had returned, and not only in stopwatch, but in mentality, in trust, in feeling of dominance over the car. That symbiosis between pilot and machine that defines the champions. Baku was the point where the narrative changed. Where Ferrari ceased to be a show of force to become a useful tool. Where Hamilton stopped resisting adaptation to finally surrender to the process. It wasn't just a free session. It was the symbol that the Hamilton-Ferrari project has pulsations. It has life. And more importantly, it has a future. The difference between a good pilot and a champion is not alone in speed. It is in the way in which it responds to technical adversity. And that is exactly what Lewis Hamilton showed in Baku. Not only was it fast, it was intelligent. It was meticulous. It was clinical. After the adjustments implemented by Ferrari, the FP2 was not simply one more session. It was the first symptom that the relationship between the British pilot and the SF-25 was evolving towards something much more powerful than a simple forced adaptation. A real, technical and mental connection began to forge. A shared language between man and machine. The team's telemetry made it clear. Hamilton was not only faster, but it was more aggressive in braking without sacrificing stability. He kept more time in the adhesion limit and left the curves with a traction that he had not shown in any other previous Grand Prix. And that has a clear explanation. The braking area is where the pilot imposes his absolute trust, where there is no room to doubt, where the difference between being first or 10th is measured in meters. And Hamilton finally had control. This was possible thanks to the technical implementation of Ferrari focused on improving the thermal behavior of the brakes. Baku is one of the most extreme paths for this component. Temperatures can be shot above 1000 degrees Celsius, and that compromises not only the braking but the general balance of the car. The new redesigned front ducts allowed to maintain a stable temperature for long batches, avoiding the classic fading that had hurt Hamilton throughout the first half of the season. The impressive thing is that all this happened in a margin of hours. Ferrari went from a dysfunctional session to a demonstration of technical control. But even more, Lewis went from being a lost pilot to a dominant pilot. And not just that. In the FP2, another even more revealing phenomenon was observed. The way in which Lewis attacked the curves of 90 degrees characteristic of Baku had nothing to do with pure speed, but with the rhythm, the constancy, the ability to repeat return after stable behavior without surprises, without violent corrections. When a pilot achieves that, the car ceases to be an obstacle. It becomes an extension of its instinct. And that, in a street circuit like Baku, is a sign of absolute domain. In the direct comparison with Leclerc, the differences were minimal in the stopwatch but giants in style. Leclerc was fast, yes, but still with signs of discomfort with the rear train. Hamilton, on the other hand, began to show fluency. In his body language, in his way of taking the blind curves of Sector 2, in how he cut centimeters to the walls without hesitation. That characteristic style that defined his golden era. But there is another factor that has been overlooked, and that is key: mental trust. Because in Formula One, the technical and emotional part are not separable. One thing feeds the other. When the car responds, the pilot risks more. When the pilot risks and receives reward, trust multiplies. And so, a virtuous performance cycle is created that only the largest know how to take advantage. What Baku left on the table is that this cycle is beginning to turn for Hamilton and Ferrari. And it is no accident that happens right now. After two great awards full of doubts, criticism, and a media narrative that began to question its signing, this practice's performance represents more than a Good Friday. It is a silent warning. A signal to the rest of the grill that Hamilton still has gunpowder. That Ferrari with him in command can be a serious threat again. The paddock noticed it. The rivals commented. The data confirmed it. And Lewis simply smiled. Because for someone who has been at the top, who has lived the wars with Rosberg, the tactical battles against Verstappen, and the years of absolute domain, leading a free practice is not a reason for euphoria. It is a reason for confirmation. Confirmation that, despite all changes, despite all the noise, it still has the most important thing: control. Baku was not a victory, but it was a statement. And sometimes, in Formula One, the statements weigh more than the points. Especially when they come from a 7-time world champion who has begun to feel comfortable with his new red armor. After what we saw in Baku, there is a question that can no longer be avoided. Does the Hamilton era in Ferrari just begin? 4 months, many believe that the signing of Heptacampion was little more than a media blow. A desperate attempt by Ferrari for recovering some of his ancient greatness. A symbolic movement. Nostalgic. But if something has taught Formula One is that the story is not written with headlines but with turns. With data, with telemetry, with pure performance. And in Baku, for the first time since he got on SF25, Hamilton began writing that new story with his own ink. It is not a secret that getting to Ferrari implies a special burden. It is not any red car. It is the weight of a nation, of a global hobby that mixes passion with demand, that does not forgive mistakes but that idolizes the delivery. And Hamilton knew it. What perhaps did not expect was how much it would have to be rebuilt as a pilot to live up to that challenge. The easy thing would have been to stay in the comfortable area in Mercedes, waiting for a recovery that did not arrive. But he chose the complex route. He chose the technical abyss. He chose starting from scratch. And such decisions define races. What lived in Azerbaijan was not just a tactical response. It was a psychological turn. Hamilton not only improved his times, he felt the protagonist again. He looked at himself in the mirror and see the pilot who so many times folded the rest of the grill, which so many times improvised under pressure, which knew how to find victories where others only saw chaos. That pilot, that instinct, that competitive beast seemed numb. But in Baku he woke up. Now the big question is not if it can repeat it. It is if you can hold it. Because in Formula One, a brilliant weekend can be just that, an exception. The difficult thing is consistency. The really valuable thing is to turn a turning point into a trend. And that is where you will see if Hamilton and Ferrari are ready for more than a flash. If they are prepared to challenge a McLaren who dominates the classification, a Verstappen who has already won 2 races, and a Mercedes who does not stop improving. Hamilton has shown that he is not in Ferrari just to pose on covers. It is to compete, to bother, to make noise. And when a pilot from his caliber recovers technical confidence, the domino effect is inevitable.